Emily Carter stood in her Seattle kitchen, staring at her phone as if it held the answer to a question she'd been afraid to ask for 2 years. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that reminded her of everything she had lost. After her husband Mark passed away, the silence had become a part of her life, slowly settling into the corners of every room. But that afternoon, the silence felt heavier because she was standing there debating something she never imagined. She would overthink inviting her stepson, Liam, to dinner. She typed the message for the 10th time, "Would you like to come over for dinner?" and felt her heart beat faster. It wasn't dramatic or romantic or anything like that. It was simply the truth that she missed him. She missed having someone who understood the past, someone who once felt like family, someone whose presence didn't make the house feel so empty. But things had changed after Mark died. Liam had pulled away, not in a hurtful way, but in the quiet way people do when grief twists their world. He finished college, moved to a different part of the city, and stayed busy with work. They spoke only for birthdays or holidays, and each conversation felt shorter than the last. Still, Emily could never forget how close they used to be. She had entered Liam's life when he was 16, old enough to have opinions, old enough to keep his distance if he wanted to. But he didn't. He had accepted her quickly, even warmly. He had trusted her, talked to her, sometimes even more than he talked to his own father. They used to cook together, laugh at silly shows, and share quiet moments that made their home feel safe and steady. But after Mark passed, everything changed. Emily fell into loneliness. Liam fell into silence. And neither of them knew how to reach for the other without feeling like they were stepping into painful memories. That was why the simple text message felt so heavy. Finally, with a deep breath, she pressed send. Her phone buzzed almost instantly. "Liam? Yeah. I'll come." Emily froze. She reread the message 3 times, half expecting it to change. For the first time in months, something warm moved inside her chest. Not excitement, not exactly. More like relief. More like the feeling of a window being opened after a long winter. She moved quickly through the house, cleaning the dining table, checking the fridge, choosing a simple dinner: roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and a salad. Food Liam always liked. Her hands moved on their own, fast and nervous, as if she needed everything to be perfect, even though she didn't know what perfect meant anymore. Every few minutes, she glanced at the clock. She practiced what she might say. She rehearsed calm greetings in her head. She even changed her sweater twice, because suddenly she cared too much about how she looked. She told herself this was normal, just wanting to reconnect with someone she once cared about deeply. That was all. Nothing unusual. Nothing complicated. But when the doorbell finally rang, her breath caught in her throat. She wasn't ready. Not for the memories. Not for the emotions she thought she had buried. Not for how it would feel to see him again. She walked to the door slowly, fingers trembling even before she touched the knob. When she opened it, the cool evening air brushed against her face, and there he was. Liam stood on the porch, hands in his jacket pockets, looking both familiar and completely different. He had grown into himself. The awkward boy she once knew was gone. In his place stood a calm, confident young man with thoughtful eyes that reminded her so much of Mark, yet softer in ways she couldn't describe. His presence hit her harder than she expected. "Hi, Emily," he said quietly, with a small, warm smile that stirred something deep inside her. She felt her throat tighten before she managed to whisper, "Hi, I'm glad you came." He nodded, stepping inside. As he walked past her, she noticed the way he glanced around the house, slow, nostalgic, almost sad. His eyes lingered on the framed photos near the door, on the old chair where Mark used to sit, on the hallway they all used to walk through together. "It looks the same," said gently. "I haven't changed much," she replied. "It helps me feel connected, I guess." He nodded again, his jaw tightening just slightly, the way it always did when he held back emotions. They moved toward the dining table. Emily tried to act normal, pulling out plates, offering him water, asking him about work, but everything felt heavier than it should. Not uncomfortable, just filled with emotion neither of them knew how to release. "You've been busy," she said, trying to keep the conversation light. "Yeah," he answered. "Work takes up a lot of time. Maybe more than it should." But when he said it, there was something in his voice that made her look at him more closely. A kind of tiredness. A quiet loneliness she recognized too well as they sat down. Emily realized she was studying him the way his shoulders had broadened, the way he carried himself with a different confidence, the way a small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth each time he caught her looking at him. It felt strange, but not wrong, just unexpected. She had spent the last 2 years feeling invisible, like life had moved past her. But in that moment, sitting across from Liam, she felt seen again. Not in a romantic way, not something dramatic, just human. Just like someone who still mattered. They ate, talked in soft tones, and the air slowly warmed between them. Not because of the food, but because something inside both of them seemed to relax, a sense of comfort returning. A reminder that they once shared a bond that grief couldn't fully erase, but even as they talked. Emily felt an unspoken tension in the room. Not uncomfortable, not inappropriate, just a quiet awareness, like two people realizing they had missed each other more than they wanted to admit. And as Liam lifted his eyes to hers, giving her a gentle smile she hadn't seen in years, Emily felt her heartbeat shift. She didn't know what this meant. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing for certain. Inviting him tonight was the right choice. And as the evening unfolded, it became clear that this dinner would change more than just the quiet in her home. It would stir emotions she thought she had buried long ago. Dinner started with the kind of careful small talk people use when they are afraid of saying something real. Emily served the food quickly, trying to look calm while her heart beat faster than it needed to. Liam thanked her with a soft smile, polite and warm, as if he didn't want to make the night any heavier than it already was. The clinking of forks and plates filled the silence that neither of them knew how to break. Emily kept glancing at him, noticing small things, how he pushed his hair back when he talked, how he sat straighter than he used to, how his face held more maturity than the young man she remembered. "How's work?" she asked finally, hoping to start somewhere safe. "It's busy," he said, taking a breath. "Some days are good. Some days are long." Emily heard what was beneath his words, a quiet tiredness that didn't come from work alone. She wanted to ask more, but didn't want to pressure him. The truth was, they were two people trying to reconnect while memories sat between them like invisible walls. She nodded. "I'm glad you took time to come tonight." "I wanted to," he said quickly. "I've been meaning to visit. He paused, looking at his plate. "I didn't know if it would feel strange." "It's just dinner," she said softly. But both of them knew it wasn't just dinner. It was their first real conversation in months. Their first step back toward a connection they once shared with ease. The air warmed slowly as they ate. Soon, the distance began to fade. Liam told her about his apartment, his coworkers, his attempts at cooking that ended with burnt pans. Emily laughed, genuinely, for the first time in a while. His humor had always been easy. Natural, something he inherited from his father, but softened with his own calm personality, as they talked. She noticed how his eyes brightened whenever she laughed. She tried to ignore the flutter in her chest, reminding herself that she was simply glad to have someone at the table again. Someone who remembered this house when it wasn't so silent after a few minutes. The conversation shifted. "How have you been, Emily?" Liam asked, his voice quieter now. "Really?" She wasn't expecting the question. Not asked so directly. Not in that warm tone that told her he actually cared about the answer. She didn't smile. She didn't pretend. She simply exhaled. "I've been managing," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Some days are good. Some days feel like the house is too big for one person." Liam's eyes softened with understanding. He didn't speak right away. He just watched her with empathy that felt almost overwhelming. "I should have been around more," he said finally. "I didn't know how to be here without Dad. Every time I walked in, it felt like something was missing. I didn't want to bring that sadness into your life." "Cute," You wouldn't have, she whispered. He looked down, jaw tight. Regret in his expression. Emily felt a sting behind her eyes. She didn't want to cry. Not tonight. Not in front of him. But holding back grief for so long had left cracks, and now they were breaking open quietly, before a tear could fall. She wiped her face quickly and looked away. Sorry, she said with a shaky breath. I didn't mean to be emotional. You don't have to apologize to me, he said softly. He stood, walked around the table, and handed her a napkin. His gesture was gentle, careful, respectful. Not intimate, just human. Just a young man trying to comfort someone who once comforted him countless times. When she looked up at him, their eyes held for a moment longer than either expected. Emily felt heat rise in her face. Not from attraction, but from the sudden closeness. She stepped back slightly, not because she was uncomfortable, but because she didn't trust the rush of emotion inside her. Let's have dessert, she said quickly, needing space to steady her breath. Liam nodded, sensing her shift, but he didn't look hurt or confused. He simply returned to his seat, giving her room to breathe. Emily carried the plates to the kitchen, taking deep breaths as she walked. She wasn't in love with Liam. She wasn't confused about him. But the emotional weight of seeing him again, odor, kinder, still familiar, was heavier than she expected. She plated the dessert-warm apple pie and brought it to the table. Liam smiled when she set it down. You remembered, he said. Of course I did, she replied. You always asked for this. He laughed. I haven't had this in years. As they ate, the room felt lighter again. The earlier heaviness softened into something more peaceful. They talked about places they wanted to visit, movies they liked, small stories from the last 2 years they never shared. But Emily noticed something she didn't dare mention. Liam kept watching her with a look she hadn't seen before. Not romantic, not inappropriate, just warm, protective, as if he was seeing her with new eyes, recognizing her as more than his stepmother, but as a person he genuinely cared about. She tried to ignore it, tried to tell herself she was imagining things. But every time their eyes met, she felt the same quiet intensity coming from him. She looked away each time, unsure of what to feel. When dessert ended, Emily collected the dishes again, and this time Liam followed her to the kitchen. Let me help, he said. I've got it, she insisted. I know, but let me help anyway. They washed dishes side by side, quiet but comfortable. The clatter of running water filled the room. Yet underneath it was something unspoken, something neither of them wanted to break or rush. As they finished, Emily turned to thank him, but found him already looking at her. His eyes held gratitude, softness, something familiar but deeper. Dinner was really nice, he said. I didn't realize how much I missed this place. Or you. Her breath stumbled slightly. I missed you too, she admitted quietly. The moment stretched, gentle, quiet, emotionally charged in a soft, harmless way. Not inappropriate. Not romantic in the wrong sense. Just two lonely people remembering a bond they once shared. Before she could say more, Liam looked away, clearing his throat. Maybe we should go sit for a bit. Yes, she said, grateful for the change in direction. They moved to the living room, unaware that the emotions that had started over dinner were only going to grow stronger. The living room felt strangely quiet as Emily and Liam sat together on the old beige couch. The soft glow of the lamp filled the room with a warm light that made everything look softer, almost peaceful. Emily hadn't sat here with someone in a long time. The space had been a place of lonely evenings, quiet TV shows she barely watched, and memories she tried not to revisit. But now, with Liam sitting beside her, the room felt different, almost alive again. Liam noticed a photo album lying on the coffee table, the same brown leather one that used to hold every memory their little family created. I haven't seen this in years, he said, reaching for it gently. You can look, Emily said, though her voice carried a hint of hesitation. He opened the album, and instantly the past bloomed in front of them. Birthday cakes, Christmas mornings, camping trips where they all looked windswept and happy. There were pictures of Mark in his usual flannel shirts, smiling as if nothing in the world could shake him. Emily felt a tug in her chest as she saw his face. Liam grew quiet too, staring at a photo where Mark had one arm around him and the other around her. "He loved you," Liam said softly. Tracing the edge of the photo with his thumb, Emily nodded, swallowing the sudden ache inside her. "He loved you more," she replied. "He talked about you every day." Liam's eyes softened. "I miss him," he whispered. "I know," Stay continued, flipping through the pages. But then they landed on one particular photo, one Emily had not expected him to pause on so intently. It was from Christmas years ago. Emily stood on a chair hanging a star on the tree. And Liam, younger and smiling, had his arm loosely around her to steady her. It had been a simple moment, innocent and warm, but looking at it now felt strangely emotional. "You remember this night?" he asked quietly. "I do," she said, her voice barely above a breath. "You were laughing because the star wouldn't stay straight," he said. "Dad kept saying he would fix it, but you wouldn't let him." Emily smiled faintly, remembering how Mark had stood back, pretending to be annoyed while secretly loving every second. "You made that house feel like home," Liam continued, "even before you and Dad got married." The comment surprised her. "I didn't know you felt that way," she said softly. "I always felt safe around you," he replied. "You were steady, kind, someone I could talk to." Emily felt her heartbeat shift. Not because of anything inappropriate, but because the honesty in his voice was something she hadn't heard in a long time. It had been years since anyone told her she mattered. She closed the album gently, needing a moment to breathe. The memories were comforting, but also heavy, stirring feelings she didn't want to speak aloud. "Emily," Liam said, his tone softer now. "I know we don't talk much, but I hope you know I've always cared about you." She looked at him, searching for the right words. "I care about you too," she said. "You've always been important to me." He nodded, his gaze lingering on her longer than before. It wasn't romantic, but it carried depth, like he was trying to understand something about her he had missed all these years. But Emily shook her head a little, trying to break the tension she felt growing within herself. "We're both emotional tonight," she said gently. "It's been a long few years for both of us." "I'm not confused," Liam said quietly, surprising her. "I know what I feel." Emily felt her breath hitch. She didn't want to misread anything, didn't want to create a moment out of something innocent. She stepped back emotionally, keeping her voice steady. "We're family," she said. "That's what matters. Bonds don't disappear just because life changes." He nodded slowly, as if trying to accept her words even if they didn't match everything inside him, before either of them could say more. Her phone buzzed loudly on the table. The sound broke the delicate moment instantly. Emily grabbed it quickly. Was her sister calling? She excused herself, walking into the hallway to answer as she spoke softly into the phone. She didn't notice Liam watching her from the couch. His expression carried a quiet sadness mixed with something thoughtful. He wasn't in love with her, not in the romantic sense, but he cared for her deeply, more deeply than he had realized before tonight. Seeing her alone, holding the house together, carrying her grief with quiet strength, affected him. When Emily returned, Liam quickly looked away, pretending to be absorbed in the photo album again. "Sorry," she said, sitting back down. "She just wanted to check on me." "She worries about you," he said. "She does," Emily replied. "Everyone does." "You deserve to be checked on," he said gently. Emily felt the words warm her more than they should have. She wasn't looking for romance. She wasn't trying to fill a void. But having someone care, someone who remembered her at her happiest, felt comforting. They spent the next hour talking lightly to ease the heavy air. They shared stories they hadn't told in years, like the time Liam got grounded for sneaking out to meet friends, or how Emily once burned a whole batch of cookies and blamed the oven. They laughed at the memories, the kind of easy laughter that comes from shared history. But even in the laughter, Emily felt something quietly shifting within her. Maybe it wasn't feelings for Liam. Maybe it was simply the realization that she wasn't as alone as she thought. that someone still saw her as more than a widow trying to move through her days. As the conversation flowed, Liam occasionally looked at her with a softness that made her heart twist not because she wanted anything to happen, but because it reminded her of what connection felt like. By the time the room grew dimmer and the clock ticked past 10, Emily knew the night had changed something inside both of them. Not in an inappropriate way, just in a human way. In a way that came from two people who shared the same grief and the same lonely spaces. Something old had reopened. Something new had quietly begun, and neither of them fully understood it yet. The night had grown darker outside, and the quiet hum of the house seemed softer than before. Emily and Liam sat on the couch for a few more minutes after finishing their stories. But the weight of the long day slowly settled around them. Emily glanced at the clock and realized how much time had passed. She didn't want the night to end, but she knew Liam had a long drive back, and she didn't want to hold him longer than necessary. "It's getting late," she said gently, her voice calm but tinged with something she couldn't hide. She wasn't ready to let the warmth of the evening fade away. "Yeah," Liam said softly, rubbing his hands together. "I should head out soon." Neither of them made the first move to stand. They just sat there, letting the quiet stretch comfortably between them. It wasn't awkward, it felt peaceful. Like something inside both of them had settled after months of distance. Finally, Emily rose from the couch and gave him a small, encouraging smile. "Let me walk you to the door." Liam stood too, nodding slowly. As they walked down the hallway, their footsteps were the only sound, and Emily felt a strange heaviness in her chest. She wasn't sad exactly, just aware of how much this night had meant to her. She had been lonely for so long that simply having conversation, laughter, and presence under her roof again felt like sunlight after a long winter at the door. Liam reached for his jacket and slipped it on. He looked around the entryway, their old wooden mirror, the coat rack. The familiar Rugand gave a soft smile. "This place brings back a lot of memories." "Good ones." "I hope," Emily said. "The best ones," he answered, and the sincerity in his voice made her look up at him with gentle surprise. He shifted slightly, as if searching for the right words. "Tonight meant a lot to me," he said slowly. "More than you probably realize. I didn't know how much I missed being here, with you." Emily felt her throat tighten. She didn't know what to say without her emotions spilling out too quickly, so she spoke the only truth she could form. "It meant a lot to me, too." Their eyes met, and for a quiet moment they simply stood there. Two people who shared grief, memories, and a bond that had survived distance and silence. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't inappropriate. It was the kind of connection that forms between two people who have walked through the same pain and still care for each other deeply. A soft sadness flickered across Liam's face. But it was gentle, not heavy. "I should have visited sooner," he said. "I didn't realize how much staying away was hurting both of us." "Grief does strange things," Emily replied. "We all handle it differently." He nodded, understanding. "Still, I'm sorry." "You don't have to apologize," she said warmly. "You came tonight. That's what matters." For a moment, neither of them moved. The hallway light cast a soft glow between them, making everything feel almost too quiet, too vulnerable. Liam took a small breath, gathering courage for something he wanted to say. "If you ever need company," he said softly, "or even just someone to sit with you, I'm here. You don't have to go through everything alone." Emily felt something inside her soften, the kind of feeling that comes when someone finally reaches into the loneliness you've been carrying and lifts even a small part of it. She placed a gentle hand on his arm, a gesture full of gratitude, calmness, and affection. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll remember that." He looked at her hand resting lightly on his arm, then back at her face. His expression held warmth, deep care, familiar respect, a quiet promise. It wasn't romantic, and it wasn't misunderstood. It was simply human. A moment of connection that grew out of shared history and genuine care. After a breath, Emily stepped back, giving him room to leave. Liam opened the door and a cool breeze drifted in. He stepped out onto the porch, But before he walked down the steps, he turned around to look at her one more time. "You're stronger than you think," he said softly. Emily felt a smile rise without her meaning it. "You are too," she replied. He held her gaze for a heartbeat, just long enough for her to feel the weight of the moment, then gave a small, undeceivable warm smile before turning away. She watched him walk to his car, each step slow, as if he didn't want to rush away from the night they had finally rebuilt a connection. Just before he opened the car door, he looked back again, gave her a little wave, then drove off slowly down the street. His car disappeared into the evening, leaving behind a quiet neighborhood and a house that suddenly didn't feel as empty as it had the day before. Emily closed the door gently and leaned her back against it, letting out a long breath she didn't realize she was holding. The house around her felt different. Not louder, not brighter, but calmer, softer. As if the walls themselves had taken a deep breath after holding grief for too long. She walked back to the living room and looked at the photo album still lying on the table. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel overwhelmed by it. Instead, she felt grateful for the past. Grateful for the memories and grateful for the chance to reconnect with someone who shared the same love for a man they both missed deeply. She touched the cover of the album lightly and whispered, "We're going to be okay." Emily wasn't thinking about love. She wasn't thinking about starting anything new. She was thinking about healing, about rebuilding a bond she thought she had lost, about finding comfort in the presence of someone who had known her at her best and her worst. Tonight hadn't been dramatic. There were no sudden confessions, no tangled emotions, no lines crossed. It had been simple, honest, human. It had reminded her that even after loss, even after distance, people can find their way back to each other not through romance, but through understanding, respect, and shared history. As she shut off the lights and headed to bed, Emily felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, a quiet sense of hope. Not the kind that rushed in quickly, but the gentle kind that whispers, "You're not alone anymore." And for the first time in years, she believed it.